For over 100 years, one swimming hole in the Queensland rainforest has been quietly killing people, almost all of them young men. The water looks calm, the place looks like paradise, and the local people have always known exactly why you should never go in. 60 kilometres south of Cairns in far north Queensland, the rainforest parts to reveal the Boulders Scenic Reserve. This is Babinda Boulders, a highly popular swimming spot on Babinda Creek. The area is defined by emerald waters, smooth granite slabs, and cool mountain air that draws thousands of tourists and locals every year. But deeper within this reserve, past the safe family picnic areas, lies a specific, restricted stretch of water known as Devil's Pool. To anyone standing on the viewing platforms, the pool seems entirely peaceful. The water is remarkably clear, slow-moving and cool, an incredibly inviting swimming hole in the tropical heat. There are no sudden rapids visible, no jagged rocks blocking the path, and no obvious signs of threat. The surroundings do not look like a trap. They look like paradise. Yet this exact stretch of water holds a dark reputation that has kept the local community on edge for generations. This is a real public park with a documented history of danger, tucked quietly away beneath the canopy of the wet tropics. Every weekend, families pack lunches, swimmers splash in the designated cold water pools, and photographers capture the massive grey rocks that choke the creek bed. On the surface, it is a classic Australian postcard, but as visitors follow the walking tracks downstream, the atmosphere shifts. The water slows, the channel narrows, and the warning signs begin to appear, marking the boundary where recreation ends and the quiet hazard of the pool begins. The peaceful appearance of Babinda Creek hides a documented record of loss that spans more than a century. This is not a collection of isolated, unrelated accidents, but a sustained pattern of fatalities that has occupied local safety records since the early decades of the 20th century. The written record begins in 1916 with the first officially documented drowning. Since that initial tragedy, the waters downstream of the main swimming area have steadily claimed lives, turning a popular natural attraction into one of the region's most persistent public safety challenges. Official tallies compiled by the Cairns Regional Council and the Queensland Coroner's Court document 21 drownings within the reserve. Because historical archives can contain gaps and older local reports occasionally conflict, the precise, final figure remains a subject of ongoing archival verification. However, whether the exact number sits at 19, 21 or higher, the statistical reality is clear. These are not random occurrences. They represent a concentrated, recurring phenomenon at a specific geographical bottleneck. An analysis of these records reveals a distinct demographic profile among the victims. This remains the most unsettling detail of the Babinda Boulders history. The losses are not evenly distributed across the thousands of tourists and locals who visit each year. According to local government data, 84% of those who have drowned at the site are male. More than half of all recorded victims, 53%, fall into a narrow age bracket, young adult men between the ages of 18 and 24. Over the decades, names have been added to this register with tragic regularity. In 1979, the search for 24-year-old Peter McGann drew national attention when his body could not be recovered for weeks. In the decades that followed, more young men, including interstate tourists, foreign visitors and local residents, entered the water and never returned. The record continues directly into the modern era, with multiple fatalities documented between 2020 and 2025. This enduring demographic concentration defies simple probability, making it clear that a specific profile of visitor is uniquely vulnerable to whatever forces operate within these waters. The Yidinji people, the traditional custodians of this country, know this place as Babinda. For thousands of years, their connection to these waters and the surrounding rainforest has been carried through oral history, preserved by elders who guard the sacred knowledge of the land. This is a living record of law, kinship and country, rather than a collection of myths meant for tourist entertainment. According to the Yidinji custodial tradition, passed down by senior custodians like Elder Annie Wonga, the dramatic terrain of the boulders was forged in a moment of devastating human tragedy. Long before European settlement, a young Yidinji woman named Oolana was promised in marriage to a respected tribal elder named Warunu. This arrangement was bound by sacred tribal laws and kinship responsibilities. But the arrival of a visiting group at the campsite of Churi Chilam changed everything. Among the visitors was Diga, a handsome young man. Olana and Diga fell in love, a forbidden bond that defied tribal custom. Knowing their love could never be accepted under the law, the two fled into the dense rainforest, seeking a life together. Their escape was short-lived. The tribes pursued them, determined to enforce the marriage agreement and preserve tribal law. When the lovers were finally cornered near the edge of the creek, Diga was seized and dragged away by his people. Separated from her love and overwhelmed by grief, Ulana broke free and threw herself into the water. The oral history records that her despair was so intense it shook the earth, tearing the valley apart and throwing up the colossal granite boulders that now block the creek. Her spirit remains trapped in the turbulent waters of Devil's Pool, crying out for her lost lover and pulling young men into the waters. For the Babinda clan, this history is a central part of their environmental stewardship and a serious warning to all who approach the water. To share this story is to honour their narrative sovereignty. Because of the sacred nature of this heritage, any representation of Ulana's story requires strict adherence to cultural protocols and formal permission from the Yidinji Land Council, ensuring that this living history is treated with the dignity it demands. Today, this intersection of ancient warning and modern safety plays out along the damp forest pathways of the reserve. Cairns Regional Council rangers patrol the creek banks daily, monitoring the perimeter and managing a hazard mitigation program that has evolved over decades. The quiet, protective stance of local authorities is backed by high steel fences, safety rails and surveillance cameras installed in 2022 to track unauthorised entry, with council officers even considering on-the-spot fines for trespassers. Bright red and white signs mark the boundary of the exclusion zone, explicitly displaying the death toll as a stark warning to all who approach. Near the entry to this restricted water, a cold stainless steel plaque commemorating 24-year-old Peter McGann reads, "He came for a visit and stayed forever." Despite these physical blockades, the pool's reputation as a forbidden challenge continues to pull people past the barriers. Rangers regularly report finding visitors, disproportionately young men, climbing over the security fences to reach the water's edge. In 2020, Brisbane father Shannon Hoffman crossed into the restricted zone at night, bypassing the prominent warnings before being swept into the fast-flowing current. To some, these choices represent the tragic, predictable outcome of youthful risk-taking. To others, they hint at something far more unsettling, as if the water itself exerts a force that overrides basic survival instincts. The local community remains divided on whether these losses are driven by a spiritual curse or simple human error. But the protective infrastructure itself treats the danger as an active living threat that refuses to be ignored. The physical reality of Devil's Pool begins with the Bartle Frere granite, a massive pluton of stone carved over millions of years by Babinda Creek. As the creek flows down from the mountains, the wide, gentle channel suddenly bottlenecks into a series of narrow, deep slots. This constriction forces an immense volume of water through a highly compressed space, completely transforming how the river behaves. During the region's frequent heavy rains, the velocity of the water accelerates to extreme speeds. Field measurements show the current rushing through these gaps at 5 to 7 metres per second. In the narrowest chutes, sudden surges can push that speed past 10 metres per second. Beneath the surface, the physical structure of the granite creates a highly complex, invisible network of hazards. The river has eroded the base of the boulders, carving out deep undercuts and hollow chambers. Many of these passages function as geological siphons and sieves. In plain terms, these are underwater drainage channels. When water rushes through these constricted gaps, it creates a powerful downward suction. This negative pressure zone acts like a vacuum, dragging objects under and holding them deep within the submerged crevices. Once trapped inside these chambers, a swimmer's physical ability to escape is severely compromised. The highly turbulent, aerated water is filled with air bubbles, which dramatically reduces buoyancy. A person cannot stay afloat because the highly aerated water lacks the density to support human weight. At the same time, the surrounding granite offers no way to climb out. Continuous chemical weathering and microscopic algae growth have polished the massive stone slabs until they are completely frictionless. There are no ledges, no handholds, and no rough edges to grip. A swimmer, swept into the current, has nothing to grab onto, removing any chance of recovery. The layout of the boulders forms a progressive physical trap. Water flows rapidly through the chute, churns violently in the area known as the washing machine, and enters the deep basin of Devil's Pool. It is a system of natural engineering, where water velocity, invisible suction, and slick stone combine to overcome human strength. Outside of this tropical gorge, young adult men drown at rates far exceeding any other demographic. National statistics compiled by Royal Life Saving Australia show that males in this age bracket are 7 times more likely to drown than females. Researchers point to several well-documented behavioural factors that drive these numbers: a higher propensity for thrill-seeking, the amplifying effect of peer pressure, and the frequent involvement of alcohol. In many ways, the Babinda pattern aligns with these national trends. The young men who step past the safety rails are often visiting in groups, testing their physical limits against a notorious natural hazard. Yet, while behavioural science explains the psychological urge to take risks, it does not fully settle the debate. It struggles to explain the sheer, hypnotic draw this specific pool exerts over generations. Despite the high steel fences, the surveillance cameras, and the prominent red and white warning signs, the water continues to pull this exact demographic past the barriers. To some, this is merely the predictable, tragic mathematics of youth and overconfidence meeting a highly lethal geological trap. To others, the extreme statistical skew, where 84% of the victims are male, only reinforces the ancient Yidinji warning of Ulana's spirit calling out for her lost lover. The mystery remains entirely unresolved, suspended between the cold mechanics of hydrology and the enduring weight of a living legend. Subscribe to explore the ancient Australian history that runs deeper than we were ever taught. The grey slabs of the Babinda Creek bed belong to the Bartle Frere granite, a massive pluton forged far within the earth during the late Cretaceous period, between 90 and 100 million years ago. Long before these mountains rose or the waters began their downward carve, this stone existed in silent darkness. Over immense geological eras, the uplift of the Belenden Kerr range pushed this ancient pluton to the surface, exposing it to the relentless onslaught of tropical monsoons. The resulting terrain is a monument to immense time, shaped by millions of years of water grinding against stone. For the Yidinji people, who have occupied Babinda for tens of thousands of years, this country represents a repository of living memory. Archaeological evidence traces their active care of this valley back at least 10,000 years, establishing a human connection that long predates modern tourism. To look at these sculpted boulders is to see a place where human memory and ancient stone are fused. The story of Ulana is a narrative born from an intimate, thousands of years old relationship with a territory that remembers. Today, the heavy steel barriers cutting through the rainforest stand as a direct response to this century-old toll. Past these fences, the physical reminders of loss are quiet but permanent. Small memorial plaques, weathered by tropical humidity, and informal shrines of faded flowers and candles mark the edges of the pool, left by families who regularly return to these granite banks to mourn. Each tribute represents a household permanently altered by these waters. Yet despite the physical blockades, the warnings and the visible grief anchored to the stone, the containment measures have not fully succeeded. Swimmers still bypass the rails, stepping over the threshold of warnings and into the quiet flow of the creek, leaving the community to wonder when the next name will be added to the rock. Australia is home to countless beautiful but lethal environments, from the treacherous coastal rips of Cape Tribulation to the swift undercurrents of the Thredbo River. Yet, Babinda Creek stands entirely apart. While other wilderness sites present isolated hazards like sheer cliffs or unpredictable currents, Babinda combines a highly specific, trap-like hydrology with a living cultural heritage and an unyielding, disproportionate pattern of young male victims. It is this exact convergence, where geological mechanics, ancient narrative and human behaviour overlap, that sharpens the unresolved mystery of the pool. The boundary between physical hazard and ancient warning remains dangerously blurred at Devil's Pool. Whether trapped by violent hydrology or drawn by Ulana's grief, the pull of this water is undeniably real. The boulders demand respect, reminding us that some landscapes defy simple explanation. Subscribe to explore more ancient Australian history that runs deeper than you were ever taught.